You're a mad scientist. What scientific experiment would you run if money and ethics weren't an issue? Story 1. If I had the money, I'd buy a bunch of islands and set them all up with the basic things people need to survive and build a home. Then it'd place different groups on each one. One island for omnivores, one for vegans, one for hardcore feminists, one for guys on the opposite end, one for SJWs and similar types, one for far left people, one for far right people, one for essential oil believers too. And then he'd just let every group build its own system and try to make things work. They would all start with the same materials, the same guides, and the same books to learn everything they'd need. No outside contact at all unless someone needed medical help, and even then the essential oil island wouldn't get assistance. I just watch how all these different groups functioned without mixing race or religion into it. Story 2. I've always had this idea that a certain genetically altered bacteria could let someone be frozen cryogenically and then safely brought back later. If I ever did this for real, I would only do it if I was nearly certain it would work, and I'd test it on myself first anyway. So, unlimited money would be the part that excites me most. Someone mentioned I might be thinking about bacteria that survive freeze-thaw cycles by producing ethylene glycol, basically antifreeze, but their biology isn't anything like ours, and those same antifreeze chemicals would be toxic if they ended up in human cells. Story 3. If money didn't matter, it'd try to build a machine that could diagnose anyone with any medical issue. I know people say robots are taking everything, but honestly, this could outperform doctors in a lot of ways. Some doctors are biased or dismiss serious symptoms because they think they're unlikely. You hear so many stories about kids with brain injuries getting labeled with ADHD or behavior problems, or women having major health issues brushed off for years. My machine would do a full medical scan just by having you sit in a chair, run a few checks, and maybe answer some questions. In 1 or 2 hours, it could find anything: cancer, mental health conditions, bone issues, epilepsy, cavities, whatever. No blood tests, no visiting 7 doctors hoping one finally listens. I came up with this partly because I have a needle phobia and hate going to appointments. I know something like this would take ages to exist, and it wouldn't look like this in real life, but I love the idea. Story 4. If we're talking true mad science, not just regular research, I'd create a mix of medical experimentation and breeding work focused on dolphins, with the goal of selecting for higher intelligence. The medical side would be about developing a mind-machine interface that could let dolphins use robotic arms so they could manipulate things with real precision. The idea would be to increase their intelligence and also their ability to use that intelligence. Basically, I'd try to uplift them using the sci-fi meaning into a fully sentient species. Story 5. Transferring a consciousness into a different, maybe cloned body. In theory, you could rewrite your genes into a better version of yourself, and, if you kept doing it, basically live forever. I think about it constantly, and every time I move my consciousness into a more advanced clone, I'd tattoo a number on the back of the neck. My original body would have a 1, the first clone would have a 2, and so on. The higher the number, the stronger, faster, smarter, and overall superior the body would be. I've always wanted to write a book or make a movie where I reach clone number 15, and then clones 1 through 14 somehow regain their own consciousness after I leave their bodies. They swear revenge for being created, used, and labeled inferior, so I spend the rest of my life dodging assassination attempts from my own clones and trying to take them out one by one. Story 6. Raise newborns with absolutely zero sensory input. The whole point would be proving that humans are blank slates until they're given stimulation. If we could prove that, maybe people would accept that most conflict doesn't come from humans themselves, but from the civilization around them. Money, religion, culture, governments. If the experiment ended with the newborn becoming essentially brain dead, it would show we're no different from a brand new computer with no software installed. It would be a huge discovery, just something no one would ever actually attempt. And when I say do it, I mean truly do it. Zero sensory signals, no light, no color, no sound, no scent, no taste, no touch, nothing. The experiments people mention from the past are nowhere close to what I'm talking about. Story 7. It'd run multiple experiments to see if we could completely remove human nature and emotions while still keeping full curiosity, creativity, and self-preservation. The whole purpose would be to create the ideal human, someone who couldn't be controlled or bent by society's influence, someone who could live alongside others with no conflict or competition at all. Those experiments would be my life's work, because if they actually succeeded, they could push us toward becoming a spacefaring civilization and maybe even reach a Type 3 society in 1,000 years. Yeah, I probably sound unhinged, but it would be for our future humans, not anyone alive right now. Humanity and civilization are what matter long term. Well, be gone, but they'll be alive, so it makes sense to try to build a future they can use to shape an even better one. Almost like a hive mind. Story 8. ED builds Sundial, a 10 gigaton H-bomb originally proposed by Edward Teller himself. That's equal to detonating 10 billion tons of TNT, roughly 607,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. I'll just imagine watching that go off. Dr. Fisk once said the committee could support Livermore's smaller weapons program, but he was uneasy about Teller's 10,000 megaton design and wondered how much of the lab's work was going toward it. Whitman was horrified at the idea of a 10,000 MT device. He said it would contaminate the entire planet. Story 9. I want to study PTSD, Stockholm Syndrome, and body dysmorphia more deeply. Basically, I imagined a lab with no sunlight and no clocks, so there's no sense of time. The temperature stays mild. Food is earned with attention tasks, like collecting stamps. 5 stamps gets you a meal. There's also counseling, which really means getting subjects to open up emotionally so the counselor can subtly reinforce insecurities, praising them while pointing out flaws to trigger body dysmorphia. In my head, there are only 2 possible outcomes. Either they submit or they rebel. The whole thing ends up leaning into a survival theme. Weird imagination, I know. Story 10. Cloning and brainwashing for military and experimental use. For drug trials, weapons tests, dangerous missions, anything too risky for real people. These clones would be versions of me, but reduced to empty shells. No personality, no real intelligence beyond following orders, no free will beyond asking for their next task. Their cognitive skills could be boosted if the assignment required it. As soldiers, they would have zero self-preservation because they wouldn't grasp the idea that their lives matter. Their only purpose would be obedience. As a failsafe, each clone would have a tiny implanted brain chip that could detonate instantly to destroy them. One tap and they're gone. If a clone malfunctioned, it would be recalled and immediately replaced. Story 11. Okay, so mad scientist mode. A D starts small to avoid being noticed. A phone-controlled microwave, a time machine, a wormhole generator, a fruit toaster, a custom Dr. Pepper machine after buying the formula. Then I'd upgrade myself with cybernetic implants so I'm no longer weak, nearsighted, or unattractive. Next, magnetic roads, anti-magnetic hover vehicles, an electromagnetic impulse engine, and a room outside time and space. Then a screen that lets me observe everything that ever was or will be. Eventually, it'd build a super soldier to eliminate war and crime. And since I trust no one, it'd take the role myself. It'd basically become the hidden god of the world, my space-time distortions erasing my tracks and probably wiping out alternate versions of me in the process. Story 12, it'd start making new species. First, plastic-eating creatures, one squid-like for the oceans, one greyhound-like for land. then sentient griffins and lizard folk, lizard people engineered to love helping with labor, and griffins trained to partner with soldiers and police, but with some of their predatory instincts toned down. It'd tweak horses and revive thousands of extinct species too. It'd invent whole categories of creatures designed for human needs, snails that secrete material hot enough to melt sand into glass, forestry dinosaurs to make logging safe, and eventually biological spaceships and terraforming organisms. A fully engineered ecosystem. Story 13. It'd want to study what really happens to the human body in space. We technically know the basics, but actually observing the effects unfiltered cosmic radiation, rapid decompression, all the extreme stuff would be both educational and horrifying. Fun fact, in a vacuum, your tongue literally boils the moisture off. With real data, who knows what breakthroughs could follow better spacesuits, safer rockets, maybe even medical discoveries. In space is the perfect test chamber, completely isolated, zero chance of contamination, and nobody is flying up there to arrest you. I don't know, just for space science reasons. Story 14. I try to perfect genetic engineering on fetuses in the womb. Imagine how much parents would pay to give their unborn child a genetic advantage, or at least prevent inherited illnesses or disabilities. The unethical side is obvious. It'd probably go through a ton of aborted fetuses during the research phase, but once the process was complete, parents who opted in could be almost certain their child would match their idea of perfect. Story 15. It'd make everyone experience real clinical depression and anxiety for a few days. Our idea of those words has drifted so far from what they actually mean. Feeling nervous about meeting new people. Totally normal, that's not anxiety. Lying awake every night convinced you'll lose your job, your home, and your family despite performing well. That's anxiety. Getting upset because someone said something rude. Not depression, hearing something harmless and your brain twist it into proof that you're a failure who doesn't deserve anything good. That's depression. Story 16. It developed personality profiles detailed enough to target individuals, but broad enough to apply to large groups. Once the profiles were built, it'd have subjects take assessments and place them into the categories. Then I'd expose each group to different types of stimuli to see how they react. My expectation is that certain profiles would be far more vulnerable to persuasion depending on the content shown to them. Story 17. Whenever I think about aging and disease, it hits me that no matter how incredible the human body is, it has hard limits when it comes to repairing itself. It'd love to run different experiments focused on DNA repair, detoxification, air filtration, and even brain repair using implants. Of course, we'd need volunteers, and they'd have to meet one requirement, some form of existing damage. In my mind, the body is like motor oil, great for a while, but eventually it loses efficiency. So why not go full synthetic and see how far we can push these machines? Story 18. When holding a government hostage, is it better to disintegrate the president and then work? If you're holding a government hostage, is it smarter to disintegrate the president first and work your way down the cabinet until they break, or start with senior cabinet members and keep the president for negotiations? And does it change anything if you really want to disintegrate the president? Also, how fast can dolphins turn evil, or are they already there? If they are, do evil dolphins prefer salmon, squid, or human fingers? And when introducing tainted tiger, bear, and rhino parts into the illegal medicinal market, is it better to use a fast-acting poison to take out buyers quickly, or a slow poison that eventually wipes out everyone involved? Story 19. It'd probably build a cryostasis pod, basically a capsule that keeps you suspended in stasis so you can sleep through millennia. It'd hope it changes the future of space travel. Scientists could improve it while I stay inside the pod until humanity becomes so advanced that aging is gone and immortality is possible. Then it tried to build a machine that creates an Einstein-Rosen bridge if no one else has yet. It revolutionized space again, able to travel wherever I want. People could jump to VY Canis Majoris, the pillars of creation, the Andromeda Galaxy, any world they need. The only unethical thing I'd do is use human test subjects first for the pod, then for the wormhole just to make sure you don't burn up when you enter. Story 20. It cut off the internet, electricity, and all access in and out of various major cities just to see if people can recover and what kind of society forms. It'd repeat it for different durations, including "this is permanent now." Can they last 24 hours, a week, a year? Are we inherently good or bad? Would they rebuild a version of modern Western society, form a dictatorship, collapse into chaos and roaming tribes, or just die out? There's plenty of sci-fi about what happens after the collapse, but I want to see what would actually happen. Story 21. Buy 2 separate cities. White people would live in the first city and black people would live in the second city. People would choose to live in these cities of their own free will. Nobody is allowed in, but the residents are allowed out. Each city would have its own economy and government, created by the people for the people. The cities would be given decades to develop, creating generations of people and families. The goal would be to see if people would be happier living with their own people, or if they would go crazy and eventually move out. Story 22. Breed as many dogs as possible and spay or neuter the offspring of those dogs that were short or medium-lived. That way, I would only have long-lived dogs continue the breeding. With each generation, I would renormalize what is considered long-lived. That way, with each subsequent generation, dogs would be increasingly long-lived. Of course, given the human lifespan, I'd only be able to do this for a brief period, under normal conditions. So I would clone myself, transfer my consciousness into my clone, and continue the experiment or breeding program to create increasingly long-lived dogs. This of course begs the question, why not simply transfer the dog's consciousness into its own clone? Good question. Answer, probably all the madness. Story 23. Carbon cycling helps. Essentially, there is a species of cyanobacteria that undergoes mitosis once a day that dominates the 100 meters, 200 meters depth range of the ocean and produces much of the oxygen in the atmosphere, while also being the smallest photosynthetic life form on the planet. I'd want to genetically alter these until they could be better grown at surface level and in most climates. They would accumulate atmospheric carbon dioxide, hopefully, and then here's the kicker, become the main but not only food source for crickets, which are intended for human consumption. The hope is to take CO2 out of the air and feed more people. Cricket chips taste a bit like a cross between flour and corn tortilla chips, and they're really good. Story 24. I'd buy an island populated with the most deadly animals and insects known to man, fence it off, then it'd drop in 15 peak human males and 15 peak females. If you touch the fence, an electric current will end you. If you try to slingshot over the fence, a great white patrolling the waters will end you as well. Your goal is to create a team of 6 and finish off the other teams on the island. A beacon will go off every hour showing the locations of all players. The catch is, only 2 of you can get off the island and your team must decide who lives and who stays. The survivors will get a chance to escape the next round. I design it so it's next to impossible to complete every time due to explosives rigged to escape craft. Story 25. In all pure science fiction novels, you see the mad scientists conducting tests and studying the effects of psyops by using control groups in addition to systemically powering down smaller city grids, cutting off bank access control for short intervals. Use news to suggest a perspective narrative to cause instability, uneasiness, and stress, then reunite the people under a common ideological narrative to drive them to begin the process of riotings. Then when things get bad, use the political agenda to force a suggestive thought that calms the people, reigning in chaos and delivering order, all while yet again suggesting specific political ideals, thus establishing a stronger bond with society. This study would be conducted over a 6-month, 6-mode break, then 12-month interval. It could make for a good novel or movie with the right creative artist reigning in the smaller intricacies. Story 26. I would take thousands of people and place them on a small island in the middle of the ocean with no escape, but each of them would have enough food to survive. I would document how long it would take for them to either die or end each other or go insane. Or I would see if a human can survive if they were forced to stay awake for 5 days straight, then be forced to sleep for 5 days straight, and try to make someone have a 5-day sleep schedule. I would also mess with genetic mutation to multiply people's height. I would try to manipulate the genes that control the height and try to make a person grow 10 feet tall. I would also try to manipulate genes of animals and humans to give a human some characteristics of an animal, like being nocturnal or regenerative abilities. Story 27. In a controlled environment, I would like to have people who are chosen at random to have a specific career, and everyone will have equal rights and everything they would need to survive. Food, water, electricity, entertainment, etc., etc., just to see if people would still be greedy or unhappy with what they have. I want to know how this society will progress, but everything should be controlled automatically so no one has more social power than the rest. Also, no one in this environment is allowed to leave, and there would always be a relaxing place for people to enjoy their vacations, so not work is not the only reason they would exist. I want them to behave naturally and not like some sort of a simulation. Story 28. Remove all children from their families at age 5, and then send them through year-round school where they get a few breaks to come home and visit until they turn 18. New schools would be mixed in every way: race, ethnicity, religion, etc. A significant amount of physical activity would be held daily. Schools would also be absent of many personal items: cell phones, tablets, laptops. The tests? How would social groups form? How much direct racism would exist within the groups when external pressures are gone? How would students perform when they are given virtually identical conditions for most of their life? Would common stereotypes of certain ethnic groups still hold up? Story 29. First, I'd make an android that could give a right answer to the trolley experiment. You see a runaway trolley moving toward 5 tied-up people lying on the tracks. You are standing next to a lever that controls a switch. If you pull the lever, the trolley will be redirected onto a side track, and the 5 people on the main track will be saved. However, there's a single person lying on the side track. You can either pull the lever and end one person, or do nothing and let the other 5 die. Then it invents some kind of machine that could copy any living being down to the tiniest level and create identical copies, then make a bunch of the same person and run them through the trolley experiment, then see if all clones, including original, would pick the same thing. And if they pick the wrong answer, it let them meet each other and observe as they perish into oblivion, knowing they could have been replaced. Their whole lives and what impact they did have on the world was in the end meaningless. Then it'd go out for pizza and ice cream. Story 30. There's this interesting treatment for cancer I've been wanting to try. The only 2 issues are that I don't know much about medical testing, and the treatment is cheap, so the US government won't go for it either way. It's something that has been shown to be very effective in smaller countries, but countries like the US won't even acknowledge its existence because companies wouldn't be able to profit from it. A friend of mine tried testing it at their university, but it was shut down for reasons they still don't know. So, ethics and money aren't issues. Shady pharmaceutical corporations and corporate greed in general are. Story 31. get a group of at least 30, have only 3 of them know basic survival tactics like lighting fires, hunting, and how to skin animals, put them on a remote island with no technology or electricity in general for 10 years, only check in 3 times a year, and see how they do with some rules of no eating each other, no trying to escape, and no self-destruction. If they can follow the rules, they will get 1 million and a scholarship to any school they want each person left to keep them motivated, and the people's gender will be split 15 to 15, but ages can vary and criminal records wouldn't matter. Story 32, I would get all American liberals and all American conservatives to switch places. All gray area politicalists can join in if they want to. So basically, I would get the most urban, democratic, liberal cities, LA, NYC, etc., to completely swap spots so they live in the most rural areas, spaced out and far apart, and do the opposite with the most rural, conservative Republicans now in giant cities and wide-scale metropolises. My goal is to see if after enough time living in the other party's shoes will they have switched parties and become the opposite of what they were politically, or if they would stay the same. A belief may be a belief, but it can be contorted and corroded with time, and I want to see how much time it takes. Also, it would be a really great way to set up perspective and maybe somehow cool down the extremist politicalites. Story 33, cloning and genetic enhancement. I would also try to transfer brains into new bodies, and I would try to create some way to connect a mind and a computer. In these 3 points is the answer to immortality. Clone yourself. Make the clone genetically better, then put your brain in it and connect it to the internet. After being immortal, I would continue working in the enhancement of living creatures and create something like the X-Men. On the side, I would run a project of a small group of people who are only taught the human language and set them into the wild in setups of different time periods to get studies on history and psychology. Story 34. Some people already said this, but transplanting a head or the brain into a different body. If it's successful, it might prove where the personality of a human is saved. Hope you understand what I mean. So, if you put the brain of person A in the body of person B, would the human be A or B? If the human has personality and memories of A, then that would mean that the personality and everything is saved in the brain. A would live on in the body of B, but if the person still has B's personality and memories, that would mean the personality is somewhere else, or even that something like a soul could actually exist. Honestly, I believe that the first scenario, A lives in the body of B, would be the most likely result. Like with a computer, you use computer 1 to save something on a CD, take it out and put the CD into computer 2, and still have access to the data you saved there on computer 1. Computer equals body, CD equals brain, data on CD equals memories and personality. Story 35, I would genetically engineer human embryos and test which variations produce humans that I find best fit. This will include those who are the most naturally susceptible to conscientiousness, altruism, problem solving, working well with others, and other values that I find important. I would attempt to create people who are very mentally stable and resilient. Mental health issues will be eliminated, and everyone will find it easy to live fulfilling lives full of satisfaction and contentment. They will all be designed to survive harsh environments, preparing the human race for climate change. This will also allow us to colonize other celestial bodies and thrive without needing a special kind of habitat for each location to protect from radiation and other potential dangers. The people would need no spacesuits and would only require a small source of oxygen with them, as they could go for long periods of time without needing any. Of course, everyone will be super attractive and physically fit. Aging will slow dramatically, and physical and mental ailments that come with aging will be non-existent. Of course, for this to work as well as possible, money and ethics need to be non-existent as well, and I would need complete control over the whole process. A man can only dream.